Hey guys, I hope you're all doing great. It's been a while since we last connected, and this time we are back with a webinar that will address some of the advanced features of the Zobot, Zoho SalesIQ's bot building platform. So without any further ado, let's jump right into the webinar. Keep your questions coming and we will answer them as soon as possible. You don't have to wait until the end of the session to shoot out your questions. There'll be a field on your screen where you can keep entering the questions and sending them out. Let me tell you how I've structured this webinar. So first, we'll quickly brush through the basics of the Zobot, what it is and what it is capable of, how these Zobots are built, what are the platforms that you can build your Zobots on, the 4 major handlers and so on. So we had looked at all of these basics in our previous webinar, the basics of Zobots and SalesIQ. Then we'll take a deep dive into the advanced features of the Zobot, such as object references, the actions that can be performed by the Zobot for the visitor, how to use input and display cards inside the scripts, and what new cards we've included in the list, visitor session APIs in the Zobot, how to use OTP for validation, and all of that. So all of these will be discussed with respect to the SalesIQ Scripts platform. I hope you remember the basics of the SalesIQ Scripts platform that we had discussed in the previous webinar, all right? But these features are also available for other platforms, all right? So shall we? Before we begin, just a teeny bit about what Zoho SalesIQ and the Zobot are. So the Zobot, like I had said, is a bot platform on SalesIQ. I'm sure a lot of you might be familiar with what SalesIQ is and how it works. For those of you who are new to the family, let me brief you on what Zoho SalesIQ is. So if you're a business owner who's looking to convert visitors from various platforms, then Zoho SalesIQ is your go-to solution. So it's a customer engagement platform that can be used to prospect, engage, convert, and retain customers for potential growth in real time. So it was basically designed for customer support, business growth, sales, marketing, customer engagement, and much more. It's basically live chat, visitor tracking, audio calls, mobile SDKs, powerful chatbots, which is a Zobot, and much more rolled onto one platform. So in this webinar, we'll focus on Zobots, their skills, how they can help your business, and also how to build a simple Zobot. So these are the features that are respective to prospecting, engaging, and retaining customers on your business website using Zoho SalesIQ. So before we move on to the next section, let me just check if I'm audible. Please post a message in case I'm not audible. You might just see my screen going off for a second, but I'm sure you can hear me. All right, so I'm just assuming that all of you can hear me, and I'm moving on to the next section. So what is the Zobot? The Zobot is a bot development platform that's available inside SalesIQ, using which SalesIQ users can build compelling bots to automate customer interactions. So we can program the bot to respond, to act, and to qualify customers. Zobots maintain a conversation with users in natural language. They understand the intent of the user and send out a response based on business rules and data of the organization. And they can be run on both websites and on mobile applications, so you have nothing to worry about. So let's get into the details. All right. So let me tell you what the fragments of the Zobot are and how chatbots are generally built in the market. So Zoho SalesIQ offers a highly interactive and engaging live chat user interface, along with audio calls and many other features on websites and mobile apps, along with a bot engine, majorly SalesIQ Scripts, which is a compelling platform that can be used to structure and customize Zobots from scratch. Then all of the visitor insights are stored inside SalesIQ. You can also export the data stored inside SalesIQ to other Zoho applications in case you're using any, or other external applications that you've been using for your business. So SalesIQ has also been designed to let you use platforms that you're familiar with. Say, for an example, if you're an end-to-end Google user, you can choose Dialogflow. Those of you that are part of the IBM family can choose Watson Assistant. Those of you that already have a bot engine can just simply integrate it using webhooks, so that you don't have to limit your building to just the SalesIQ Scripts platform. So Zoho SalesIQ Zobot is basically going to provide you everything under one roof, so that you don't have to maintain and integrate the three different fragments of a chatbot separately. So it's one system to rule out the complexity of integration of the UI, the bot engine, and the database. So SalesIQ offers many different platforms such as SalesIQ Scripts, Dialog Flows, Zia Skills, Webhooks, and Watson Assistant. So you have a category of Zoho platforms. So in this, we have two new introductions, which is the Answer Bot that works based on the strength of your knowledge base. That is, the bot provides responses to visitor queries using articles, FAQs, etc. from your knowledge base. It also uses Smalltalk. And then there's the codeless bot that lets you build virtual assistants for your business website without having to write any code. So any action or any configuration that you do inside the SalesIQ Scripts platform with code can be done on the codeless bot platform without any code. So all you have to do is just build a flowchart and click on publish, and SalesIQ is going to do all the building for you. So we have the codeless bot, we have a webhooks in case you have a fully built bot engine and you want to integrate it with a Zobot platform. We have Zia Skills that uses NLP, and we also have integrations to other platforms like Dialogflow, Watson Assistant, Microsoft Azure, and so much. So building a Zobot with SalesIQ Script. In this webinar, we'll be looking at how to build a Zobot using SalesIQ Scripts. So first, I'll tell you how the flow goes. So a visitor lands on the website, and if this visitor matches the criteria set inside the Zobot, the bot triggers a message. If not, it doesn't trigger a message, and the visitor must proceed to initiating a chat with the Zobot. When the visitor sends out a message, the message handler comes into play, the one right here. So it checks if the context in the message exists, and if it does, it collects all the inputs that it can find in the message. Otherwise, it will look for another message that matches the existing context. Once this handler is successfully executed, the context handler executes. So this one is invoked after collecting all of the necessary inputs for a particular context. So this is the overall working of the SalesIQ Scripts platform. And in the previous webinar, we looked at how to configure all the basic Zobot information and then choose platform, structure, handlers, and set up a connection and push visitor details into CRM and all of that. So these are the steps that will be involved in creating a bot inside the SalesIQ Scripts platform. So you'll have to, not just the SalesIQ Scripts platform, any particular platform for that matter. So you configure the basic Zobot information, you choose the platform, you structure handlers, then you set up connections in case you want to connect to any external services, and then you can push details into CRM or desk or any external service that corresponds to your business requirements. So since we looked at the setting up of the bot in our previous webinar, let's just move on to the next section that talks about handlers. So the backbone of the SalesIQ Scripts platform are the four major handlers. You have the trigger handler, the message handler, the context handler, and the failure handler. So I'll tell you about each of them one by one. So the trigger handler is a piece of SalesIQ script which is used to invoke a custom action or maybe a message by the bot when the visitors visit your site. So this trigger will be executed only when the rule set in the intelligent trigger section matches the visitor's criteria. So this is basically a personalized proactive chat invite that is sent to your visitor. With these trigger messages, you can attract customers to your business, and you can also make them your prospects, because who doesn't like voluntary help, right? So it's pretty much like a welcome desk at a car showroom. So once you enter the showroom, there's always someone who walks up to you and greets you and asks you what you need help with or which car models you want to look at. And the trigger handler works in the exact same way. Then you have the message handler, which is the process of reactive engagement by the bot. So this handler will be invoked when the bot receives a message from the visitor's side. And following that, the combination of messages that have been received will be analyzed and stored in the code. And then the bot will respond to the visitors based on the question that they receive from the available answers. So the best example that can help you relate better is that of a call center. So you call a support center and you tell the representative that you have trouble with something, and then they respond to you with a solution, right? So they don't voluntarily call you. That's also how the message handler functions. Then there's the context handler. So before talking about the context handler, I'd like to tell you about what a context is. So a context is basically a conversational equivalent to a web form. And these web forms are used to collect multiple inputs from the visitor to perform a single action. So similarly, a context is a definition of a web form that collects multiple inputs in a conversational manner and then executes an action, which will be the context handler. So it can work in association with the message and trigger handlers. That is, the handlers can return a context instead of a message reply. And I'd like to mention an example to help you understand this better. So on any website that we encounter on a daily basis, there are web forms that we fill out, right? So each web form has 2 to 3 fields that we'll have to fill up, and finally we have to perform an action, which is the submit action or apply or register. Say for example, you want to subscribe to a company's newsletter. You provide them the name, your email, and all the necessary details. So these are the details that will be collected by the context of the Zobot. And finally, once all of these details are entered, you click on the register button. So this action, the register action, will be performed by the context handler. Finally, you have the failure handler that gets invoked when actions returned in the other handlers fail to execute. So inputs here will be details of the visitor, the cause of the failure, the previous response for the object due to which the action had failed. And this handler will be disabled by default, but if you wish to set up failure responses, you can enable them. So it can be configured in case chats are forwarded to operators when they are offline. Operators are unavailable during business hours, operator email is invalid or inactive in the portal, or character limit was exceeded in the reply given. All right, so let's move on to the advanced features. Objects in the Zobot. So before you start building a Zobot for your business, you need to know about the objects that are available inside the Zobot. So this section aims to give you an idea of the core objects that are found throughout your custom bot implementation. So these objects will serve as a guideline for input parameters and your output response formats for the scripts used in the bots. So the following are actions that can be performed by the bots. You can handle visitor chats, which is usually done by your operators. You can configure them to forward chats to human operators. You can block spamming visitors. You can collect inputs via calendars. You can do multiple input collection for one response, and so much more. These are just a small bunch of small list. This is just a small list that I'm telling you, but you have so much more that you can do with the Zobot platform. So we'll first take a look at all of these objects one by one. So the first one will be the request object, which is a map that contains the details of a request. So with this object, you can retrieve details like, the request ID, which is unique to each action that is performed, and the embed inside which the chat is going on, the OS and browser used by the visitor, the location of the visitor, and the IP address of the visitor. Then comes a visitor object that contains all of the profile information of the website visitor. Using this, you can get details like name, email, phone, browser, IP, the address of the visitor, etc. So the URL of the page where the visitor is currently accessing, the title of the visitor's current website page, maybe the count or the number of past chats with the visitor, the source from where the visitor has referred from, and category and potential of the visitor in CRM, and other customer information. So all of these information will be contained inside the visitor object. This is again a map object. And then we have the attachment. So this one's a collection object which will contain files and respective details of the file that were shared by the visitor during a conversation. So it has attributes like the details of the visitor who has sent the file, the type of file, the JSON object that contains details of the file shared, and the time at which the file was shared in milliseconds, the comment attached with the file. And it also has some file object properties like, the size of the file that was shared, and the name and the type of the file that has been shared by the visitor. So each text message in any conversation between the Zobot and the visitor will be considered as the message object. So this has two major attributes. The first one being text, which is a mandatory attribute. And this will be the content of the conversation. And then you have meta, which is not a mandatory attribute. So these are details of the visitor message. Say, for example, the type of card that is used in case a card is used. So the card data, the type, etc. Then you have one of the most important objects of them all, responses. So this contains the output responses that are given by the bot during a conversation. So this has 4 different attributes. So you can see all of those attributes right here. So the first one is action, all right? So this one will denote the action that is performed by the bot. Then you have replies. So these are the replies given by the bot for any particular action that has been performed. Then you have the input type displayed to the visitor by the Zobot. And then you have suggestions. So these are response suggestions given by the Zobot to the visitor. So when a response contains both input and suggestions, the Zobot will consider only the input and it will ignore the suggestion. So any interaction can have one type of input, either an input widget or freeform text supported by suggestions. Also, you need to remember that visitors cannot enter any text manually when response suggestions are displayed in the chat widget. So out of these 4 attributes that we spoke about, action and replies are mandatory ones. So now that we know what objects are available in the Zobot, let's move on to the actions. There are several actions that can be performed by the Zobot during the course of its conversation with a website visitor. So these actions only accept text as their value, and they can be any of the following. First, they can be a reply. Second, they can be a forward action. Then they can be a block action, a context action, pending, or end actions. So these might sound like Greek and Latin to you, but don't worry, I will tell you about each of these actions one by one. So the first one is the reply action. So when the Zobot can handle the visitor on its own, the reply action can be used to provide replies to the visitor's queries. They only accept a collection. When I say collection, I mean a list as a value. So this collection can in turn have one or more strings. So there are 3 options available when this action is used. It can be used, first one, it can be used when there are one or more strings to be displayed. Second one, in case you have multiple maps when display cards like articles, images, and links are used. And the third is when a combination of strings and maps have to be used. So these are the 3 different cases in which 3 different options available in the reply action. Let's move on to the next one. So these are the 3 different options that I just spoke about now. This one is the strings option. So this one is multiple maps in case you use display cards like articles or images. And this one is a combination of both strings and cards. So these are the 3 different cases. Then comes the forward action. So when the bot is not trained to handle a visitor, it can forward the chat to a human operator. So the bot can also forward the chat to one specific operator who's an expert in the topic. Again, we have 3 cases possible for this action. First one is generic forward. So when just the action and the corresponding replies are specified, the chat gets forwarded to all the available operators inside your organization, and one of them can pick it up and answer the query. Then we have operator specific forward. So when the Zobot doesn't know how to handle a particular visitor query, it can forward the chat to a specific operator who's an expert in the topic, and he or she can answer it. In this case, the email address of the operator has to be specified along with the action and the reply. I hope you can see it here. So this is the second type, and the email address of the operator who has to pick up the query is mentioned here. Finally, we have a department-specific forward. So the Zobot can also forward chats to a specific department to which the query is related. Here, the ID of the corresponding department is mentioned along with the action and the replies. So there's an important point to note. This is about the Watson Assistant platform. So if you're using the operator forward option in Watson Assistant, then on adding the operator's email address, the domain of the address will get truncated by Watson. So this truncation happens on using special characters like dollar and at the rate of in a word. In order to prevent that, you will have to add the double slash before the domain name. So when the bot does not know how to handle the visitor, and it also doesn't want to forward, or it is not able to forward the chat to human operators due to various reasons, maybe the query came in during non-business hours, or all operators are busy with another chat. In all of these cases, the operator busy action can be used. So in this case, the visitor will be prompted to leave a message and the chat will be marked as missed. Then we have the block action. So when the Zobot finds the vulnerability in the chat, it can block the IP address of the visitor immediately. For this reason, the block action is used. Then comes the context action. When the bot wants to collect multiple inputs to perform one single action, it returns a context. So a context is a definition of a web form that will collect a lot of inputs in a conversational manner and then execute an action using the context handler. So once all the inputs for one context are collected, the context will end and the next context will start executing. So you can see that right here in the code. So this is the context right here, book appointment context. And once the execution of this entire book appointment context is done, execution will move on to the next context. Then there's the pending action. So if a bot needs some time to reply to the visitor's message, the pending action can be used. For example, when it tries to generate a report and send it to the visitor, or it tries to create a profile for the visitor, which may take some time, but anything lesser than 3 minutes. So in this case, a unique request ID will be available inside the request param in all of the handlers. And once the pending action is returned by the bot, the request ID that is found in the request object sent inside the param during execution will be used to execute the pending action. While this action is pending and the response is yet to be given, there will be info messages that will be sent to the visitor to show the progress of the pending action. And during the pending action, the progress information and the response can be sent to the visitor using callback APIs. So there are two callback APIs that can be used. The first one can be used to send progress information during the pending action of the Zobot. So the requested payload here will be the message or the information that you want to send to the visitor. And the other one can be used to send a response indicating that the pending action of the Zobot is complete. So any response payload is acceptable and they will get rendered or executed like how they are returned in any handler. So that's about the pending action. And finally, we have the end action. So when the Zobot wants to end the chat conversation, the end action can be used. All right. So in case you want to end a chat immediately, you can configure the end action inside the Zobot's handlers and the chat will be ended immediately. So that was about all the actions that the Zobot can accommodate. Next, we move on to using input and display cards. So the Zobot not only allows you to use text, but also rich text like calendars and widgets like articles, URLs, etc. to ease customers' experience. For this, we have features called input cards and display cards. So we had looked at a bunch of these cards during our previous webinars. So input cards are the different type of actions that are used by Zobots to procure inputs from your visitors. So some of the most importantly or commonly used input cards are calendars, sliders, location widgets, response suggestions, etc. So there are also input cards that let you collect the visitor's name, like the one right here on the screen. So this is the name input card that lets you collect visitor's name during a conversation. And in each of these slides, you will also see the syntax displayed right below and how each card looks inside the live chat window. Then you have the email widget that will let you collect emails from the visitors. And you have the phone input card that lets you collect phone numbers. And then you have URL cards that let you collect the URLs from visitors. So with cards like response suggestions, options are displayed for the visitor to choose so that they can save themselves the trouble of typing. And then you have calendars to help solve the hassle of scheduling appointments and meetings manually. You can also use range calendars for the same. And feedback widgets like star and happiness rating you have, and these can be helpful in interpreting what visitors have to say about your brand. And the location widget can be used to offer location-based services to visitors. So these are our input cards. Then we have display widgets. So these help you display rich content that consists of different formats, say images, links, etc. to your visitors. All right. So you have the video card. These are the two new additions, two most recent additions. I wouldn't say new. The two most recent additions to the list of display cards. So you have the video display card that will let you display videos on a server or videos on YouTube to your website visitors. Then you have attachments that will let you send out files like PDFs, documents, and other such files. So moving on to the next section in this webinar, there's something called visitor session in the Zobot. So this visitor session API is used to store values temporarily during a chat conversation with the website visitor. For example, if you want to perform an action like triggering a message to the visitor based on the time he had logged into your website, you can set or get the visitor's logged in time during your conversation with the visitor using the visitor session API. Remember that the values that are stored inside this visitor session API will be available only till the end of the ongoing chat. As another example, assume that you own an online clothing store and there's a visitor on your website. You can get the visitor's clothing size at the beginning of the conversation, store it in the session, and reuse it during a later part of the conversation, say when the user wants to buy from a different category of clothing. So this is the sample code right here. So at this point, using the visitor session API, we get the size from the visitor. And here we set the size, we use it, we reuse it during another part of the conversation. I'll just give you a minute to take a look at the sample code. Moving on to the next section, using OTP for validation. So, for industries like banking and e commerce, users' privacy is extremely critical. Since we talk about personal information use and financial transactions, brands take extra precautions to increase security and prevent fraudulent activities. OTP, one time password, is one of the most common methods that brands use to decrease the level of risks involved. So, along with security reasons, brands can use OTPs for marketing aims as well. So, it's also a practical way of sending hyper personalized messages to users or subscribers for instant campaigns. The OTP can be generated inside the Zobot and validate visitor identity. So let me tell you about the 7-step code that we use to generate unique OTPs for each visitor on the website. So you don't necessarily have to use the same method to generate your OTP. There are many different techniques that you can try using Deluge. So I'm just telling you about the method that we most commonly use. So in step 1, the visitor's email is obtained using the visitor session API and the email prefix value is generated. The second step involves generating 2 random integers. Then the current time is obtained in milliseconds. Following this, the time and the random integers are processed to get one random number. Then the random number string is jumbled to get a unique OTP. So we will also replace all the non-numeric characters just in case. And finally, a Z tag will be added to give the OTP a Zoho identity. So once the OTP is generated, it can be sent to the visitor via SMS or email, and the visitor's identity can be validated. So this code right here denotes the 7-step process that we use to generate OTP. Just giving you a minute to take a look at it. So moving on to the last section of our webinar, seamlessly integrating with a Zoho service. You can also make use of features from other Zoho or external services inside the Zobot. For this, you need to establish a connection with the service in the first place. So connections and SalesIQ scripts are interfaces to integrate third-party services with your Zoho service. In this case, Zoho SalesIQ. And these connections are used in a URL invocation task to access authenticated data. And to establish a connection, it is necessary to provide a connection name and an authentication type amongst other details. So when you provide these details, it'll take care of the authentication and establish a safe connection with either your Zoho apps or your external ones. So in Deluge, there are 4 HTTP methods: get, post, put, and delete, and 3 authentication types: basic, OAuth 1, and OAuth 2, where OAuth 1 and 2 are used to establish secure access between SalesIQ and other apps. So today, in a quick demo, I will show you how to set up a connection inside Zoho SalesIQ Zobot. So this is the sample code for a Zoho CRM connection that can be created. So you need to give in a name, you need to choose the scope, and configure all of the necessary information before you set up a connection. So this one is creating new tickets with Zoho Desk after establishing a connection and getting records from Desk, APIs that perform the respective functions. So with that, we have come to the end of our webinar. In case you want more information regarding Zobots and you want guidelines as to how you can build one on the SalesIQ platform, head over to our developer documentation and you can learn all about them. And also don't forget to check out our code samples. So we have samples that you can use as your template and then build based on them. And in case you have any more queries, write to us at support@zohosalesiq.com. And also don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Zoho SalesIQ. So in case you have any questions, please feel free to post them on our forums, or you can post them right now or write to us via our support team. And I'll see you in the next webinar. Until then, take care and stay safe. Thank you. So this is the sample code for a Zoho CRM connection. So you need to provide a name and also choose the scope before you create the connection. So this is the API that creates a new lead inside Zoho CRM. So this one is, these are two APIs that are used to create a new ticket and also get records from Zoho Desk. So in case you have any questions, so with that, we come to the end of our webinar. And in case you need more help with respect to building Zobots for your business website, head over to our developer documentation and don't forget to check out our code samples. So these samples are templates based on which you can start building your own virtual assistants for your business website. And in case you have more queries, write to us at support@zohosalesiq.com. And also don't forget to follow us on Twitter. And if you have any questions and you want to post them right now, you can go ahead, or you can also write to us on our forums. So I'll see you in the next webinar. Until then, stay safe and take care. We hope you enjoyed this session. Thank you and have a nice day.